On May 22nd, 2003, my mother, Bernice Wydra, died. But this movie is not about her. After she died, several of us cleaned out her house, a job made more difficult by my father, who died 21 years earlier. You see, he was a hoarder. Almost everything in that mouse-infested house was thrown away. While my sisters cleaned out the living area, I tackled the basement. It was there, up in the rafters. I found a small cardboard box, hidden. The holes in the corner of the box were the front and back entrances for generations of mice that called the box their home. I carried the box outside into the light and opened it. All I could see were the remains of mouse nests made from shredded paper. These abandoned nests were covered with urine and feces, and the wretched smell was strong enough to make one gag. The people around me said, "Throw that out!" But I didn't. I lifted the mangled mess of nests out of the box and uncovered some very old letters. Thinking the stamps might be worth something, I put the box aside. Later, after the contents aired out, I started to go through the letters. They were from Alice, my father's stepsister, and were addressed to her dad, John. That was surprising to me because I didn't know my father had a stepsister. She was never mentioned. Before I tore the stamps off the envelopes, I decided to read a couple of them. The story of Alice was finally revealed to me, and I couldn't stop reading the letters as her life unfolded. The story brought tears to my eyes. Alice was born in 1910 to an impoverished young couple. Her dad owned a thresher, and he made money threshing farm fields in some of the poorest agricultural land in northern Minnesota. He didn't make much money, but it was enough to survive on. Then, tragedy hit. When Alice was just a young girl, her mother Helena came down with tuberculosis. Helena knew she was dying and wouldn't be around to help Alice as she grew up. So Helena did the only thing she could afford. She gave Alice a hope chest, which was her trunk filled with bedspreads, her curtains, a tablecloth, and pictures. Helena died when Alice was just 8 years old. It's almost certain that Alice would become the woman of the house to cook and clean for her father at the tender age of 8, now that her mother was gone. And that became even harder because about the same time her mother died, Alice's hips started to hurt, and she began to limp. This happened while World War I raged on, and in those days poor women and men often worked very long hours because they had no modern conveniences. They had to farm, can vegetables, cook everything from scratch on wood-burning stoves, do laundry by hand, churn their own butter, and do many other chores. Now that Helena was gone, John was left to raise Alice on his own, to be her mother, her father, and run a business all at the same time. As if that was not bad enough, things got worse. A few months later, Alice was diagnosed with tuberculosis of the hip. Her dad brought her to a new hospital in Phelan Park, St. Paul, that opened just 7 years earlier, the State Hospital for Indigent, Crippled, and Deformed Children. There she was treated by the famous Dr. Gillette. This hospital is an early example of public health care funded by the state of Minnesota, and it was the first of its kind in the United States. It was here that Alice spent the next 1,485 days, most of it in various casts, braces, and in a body frame. That is over 4 years. While she was confined in this hospital, Alice wrote letters to her dad. Many of these letters were either lost or destroyed, but some survived, and these are the letters that I found. They tell a story of the life of a girl from the age of 8 to 12 confined in a hospital 150 miles from home. She liked to draw and sent many of her drawings home. Many were patriotic. Here's one of the letters that she wrote after 6 months while she was still in the 3rd grade. May 23rd, 1919. My dear Daddy, I received your letter Wednesday and sure was glad to hear from you. How are you getting along up in Eveleth working with Uncle Joe? I'm feeling fine and dandy, haha. Will you please send me some paper and stamps and envelopes and a pencil and a new dress? My dresses are so short for me I have to have all my dresses made longer. Get me a sailor suit and red tie and also red ribbon to match. And that's all, so good night, Papa. I'll be a good girl because I'm going to confession tomorrow. So I will close. From your daughter, Alice Gola. Come and take me home. I cry every day. Come and take me home because I'm so lonesome for you. I cry every day for you. Come and take me home. She stayed in the hospital another 3.5 years. Here are a few things that can be learned from her letters. The floors are hard like sidewalks. They showed a Charlie Chaplin movie about World War I and the Kaiser. Some children are jealous because in the diphtheria ward they have medicine, oranges, and apples. There was a head lice outbreak on her ward. The lice were combed out of the children's hairs. Her uncle was discharged from the army early because he was sprayed with mustard gas. She got sick twice. Once bad enough they took cultures and were considering operating on her ears. The other time, she got chicken pox and had to be quarantined. Once she had 2 helpings of beans and bread. Another day they had pudding, candy bananas, bread and milk. The pudding tasted like rotten eggs. The ward was drafty, and on windy winter days, they would let her use 2 blankets. On December 29th, 1920, she sent a letter home saying that she didn't mind not getting a Christmas present from her dad even though she gave him one. And that's where the letters stopped. There are no letters for 1.5 years. During that time, her doctor, Arthur Gillette, died. Then, there is one last letter sent from the hospital 4 months before she was discharged. In 1930, when Alice was 20 years old, the letters start again. Alice had left home to get a job so she could buy nice things for herself. That was 1 year after the Great Depression started. She asked for her trunk and her dad sent it to her, but all of the things that her mother had left for her were gone. All that was in the trunk were some old worn-out dresses. Alice wrote a nasty letter to her dad because he had taken the only things that Helena had left for Alice. 2 days later, she wrote a second letter to her dad threatening to get a lawyer to collect money for the missing things. 1 year after that, Alice sent a letter asking for enough money for bus fare and to send her trunk home. She said that she wanted to stay for a while if he wouldn't kick her out. This is just before her dad married my grandmother. 4 years later, Alice married and had 3 children in just over 3 years. One was a daughter that she named after herself, but baby Alice died shortly after. In a few years, Alice's health started to fail, and once again she was hospitalized for an extended period. This time, she did not make it out of the hospital alive. Alice died from complications of pulmonary tuberculosis in 1951, leaving her young children without a mother, just like her mother left her. Just 1 year after she died, new drugs came out that were able to cure 91% of the people with TB.